This episode is brought to you by Amazon. The holidays are here, and you know what that means? It's time to get your friends and family the gifts they deserve. Take the stress out of shopping with Amazon's great deals and low prices on a huge range of items from toys to tech and much more. Whoever you're gifting for, Amazon has great prices on everything you need this holiday season. Shop Amazon for all your gifting needs.
How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 3.
Breaking news. Welcome. It's Eric Erickson here. Breaking news. The Federal Reserve is surprising everybody with a half-point cut. A lot of people thought it was going to be a quarter-point cut. And, you know, I've been telling Philip, we were sitting on the front porch on Sunday, and he said, what do you think it's going to be? I said, I think it's going to be half point. Half a percentage point. And he says, I'm thinking a quarter point. I said, well, I'm thinking a quarter point too, and I've been wrong every time. So that's why I'm going with half, and I've been wrong every time. And, well, half point, which I guess kind of technically makes me right. The Dow, the markets, they're all surging. The Russell 2000 up, NASDAQ up 139 points, 49 points. It just refreshed. S&P up 35 points. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up 203 points right now. Jerome Powell deciding they will cut the interest rates by a half point. What's so interesting is that the CNBC still has its earlier stories that Fed to cut. Markets reaction based on how deep the cuts. Markets expect a quarter point cut, and yet it's now a half a point. This is from CNBC happening right now. Again, it's breaking news. The Federal Reserve has decided to cut interest rates a half a percentage point. The Federal Reserve on Wednesday enacted its first interest rate cut since the early days of the COVID pandemic, slicing half a percentage point off benchmark rates in an effort to head off a slowdown in the labor market. With both the jobs picture and inflation softening, the central bank's Federal Open Markets Committee chose to lower its key overnight borrowing rate by a half percentage point or 50 basis points, affirming market expectations that had recently shifted from an outlook for a cut half that size. Outside of the emergency rate cuts during COVID, the last time the Federal Open Markets Committee cut by a half point was in 2008 during the global financial crisis. The decision lowers the federal funds rate to a range between 4.75% and 5%. While the rate sets short-term borrowing costs for banks, it spills over into multiple consumer products such as mortgages, car loans, and credit cards. In addition to their reduction, the committee indicated through its dot plot the equivalent of 50 more basis point cuts by the end of the year, close to market pricing. The matrix of individual officials' expectations pointed to another full percent point in cuts by the end of 2025 and a half point in 2026. In all, the dot plot shows the benchmark rate coming down about 2 percentage points beyond Wednesday's move. The committee has gained greater confidence that inflation is moving sustainably toward 2% and judges that the risks to achieving its employment and inflation goals are roughly in balance, the post-meeting statement said. The decision to ease came in light of progress on inflation and the balance of risks, according to the statement. The vote was 11-1, with Governor Michelle Bowman preferring a quarter-point move. In assessing the state of the economy, the committee judged that, quote, job gains have slowed and the unemployment rate has moved up but remains low. The officials raised their expected employment rate this year to 4.4% from the 4% projection in June and lowered their inflation outlook to 2.3% from 2.6%. On core inflation, the committee is suggesting a projection of 2.6%, which is a 0.2% reduction from June. The committee expects the long-term neutral rate to be about 2.9%, a level that has drifted higher as the Fed struggles to get inflation down to 2%. They say most economic indicators look solid. Gross domestic product has been rising steadily. The Atlanta Federal Reserve is tracking 3% growth in the third quarter based on continued strength in consumer spending. The Federal Reserve chose to cut even though most gauges indicate inflation is well ahead of the 2% target. The Fed's preferred gauge is 2.5%. Now, there are concerns about the labor market and an economic slowdown and a recession coming. Here is a couple of takeaway points from this news. And if you're just tuning in, it's really big breaking news. This affects you more than pretty much anything that's going to happen in Washington this week. The Federal Reserve cutting interest rates half a percentage point with a suggestion that by year's end, by Christmas, there will be another half a percentage point cut. So a full 1 percentage point drop in interest rates by the end of this year, bringing costs down to about 4%, which will be good for the economy. It will be a stimulus. It could provoke inflation. There are a couple things you got to understand. The Federal Reserve for a very long time was tasked with managing inflation. And the way they manage inflation is through the adjustment of interest rates. Now, what are the interest rates that they manage? They don't really manage your mortgage rate or your car loan rate. What the Federal Reserve does is it manages the supply of money in the economy. The way it manages it is through the interest it charges banks. So when a bank goes to the Federal Reserve and borrows $1 million, the Federal Reserve charges the bank its rate, which right now, let's say, is 5%. So the Fed puts a 5% interest on the loan to the bank of $1 million. The bank then loans 10 people $100,000 each. And the bank charges them prime plus. What is prime plus? Well, that's the prime rate, what the Fed rate is, 5%, plus some additional. For people with not great credit, it might be 8%. For people with really good credit, it might be 5.25%. But so now the Fed is getting 5% from the bank on the $1 million. The bank has divided up that $1 million in 10 $100,000 loans to people, and they're charging variable rates, all of which are more than 5%. That's how the bank is making its money. And the Federal Reserve, the higher it charges rates, the higher banks must charge rates, which discourages lending from people, which slows down the amount of money in the economy, which brings down inflation because inflation gets cash starved. The reason we have inflation is when interest rates are very low and the government dumps a whole lot of money into the economy. It drives up the prices of everything because people want to make some level of profit. They have some level of expectation sales, and people have more money to buy stuff. So this is my continuously dumbing down for everyone to understand analogy, and I realize there are people smarter than me yelling at me, Erickson, you're leaving out details, you're getting it wrong. This is for people who are not financial people to try to understand. Let's take $1,000 for an Xbox. You hand every American $1,000 to buy an Xbox. You know what's going to happen to the price of the Xbox? The Xbox price is probably going to go to $10,000. That's inflation. Why? Because you can only make a limited number of Xboxes. You can't make an Xbox for all 350 million Americans who now have $1,000 to buy an Xbox. So the price of the Xbox is now going to go to $10,000 to limit the availability of the Xbox because there are only so many chips, there are only so many Xboxes. That's inflation. You give everybody a bunch of money so that they can buy something. Well, the price of that thing is going to go up because there are only a fixed number of those things. There are every year a fixed number of apples that the apple trees can produce. There are a fixed number of cows that can be slaughtered. There are a fixed number of ears of corn that can be picked. And when everybody's got money to go buy it all, well, that stuff has to go up in price to restrict the amount that people can actually buy. Otherwise, there will be shortages. And in the laws of supply and demand, the market balances itself out. The more supply there is, the lower the price. The less supply there is, the higher the price. The more the demand there is, the higher the price. The lower the demand, the lower the price. It all balances out on a supply and demand curve. When the Federal Reserve raises interest rates, it makes it more expensive to get money into the economy, so it slows down the economy and decreases inflation. When the Federal Reserve cuts interest rates, It increases the amount of money in the economy and can spark inflation. And that's kind of the concern with the 0.5 percentage point increase or decrease. There is already higher inflation than what the Fed wants. The Federal Reserve has an expectation of 2% inflation, which is a good thing. A 2% inflation means wages can rise comfortably and salaries can rise. Well, wages and salaries, the cost of goods can rise. Everything can rise at about 2%. That's kind of absorbable by everyone in the economy. The problem is right now, everything's roughly 3%, 2.9% to 3%. So inflation's still higher than it should be. But in the 1980s, Congress mandated the Federal Reserve have additional responsibilities for employment. So the Fed has to balance two competing issues, inflation and employment. And when the Federal Reserve raises interest rates, it can kill inflation, but it can also slow down the economy, provoking a recession, which increases unemployment. It's unfair that the government did this to the Federal Reserve, but they did it nonetheless. When Alan Greenspan was the chairman of the Federal Reserve, his recommendation was always ignore unemployment and focus on interest rates. Because if interest rates can stay low and inflation can be out of the way, employment can be high. We're in a weird situation right now where we have inflation, we have interest rates high that they are, and now we've got growing unemployment. The Fed has more juggling to do than they have in the past. They're trying to thread a needle without sparking an inflation or without sparking a recession. Now, here's the problem. The odds of a recession have continued to go up. Now, here's the thing that the Federal Reserve does, which I find so intriguing. The Federal Reserve releases a statement, and the statement is the same every time with just key words changed. And you can see the Federal Reserve's thinking based on the words that they changed. So, for example, when they released the statement in July, here's how it read. Recent indicators suggest that economic activity has continued to expand at a solid pace. Job gains have moderated, and the employment rate has moved up but remains low. Here's how it's changed now. Recent indicators suggest that economic activity has continued to expand at a solid pace. No change in that sentence. Job gains have slowed, and the unemployment rate has moved up but remains low. So what changed was in June they said job gains have moderated, and now they say job gains have slowed. Additionally, in the next sentence, in June it read, inflation has eased over the past year but remains somewhat elevated. In recent months, there has been some further progress towards the 2% inflation objective. Here's how it reads now. Inflation has made further progress towards the committee's 2% objective, but remains somewhat elevated. They deleted the entire phrase, eased over the past year, but remains somewhat elevated. In recent months, there has been some further progress. They've also done this with the second paragraph. The committee seeks to achieve maximum employment and inflation at the rate of 2% over the long run. Now they've added a new section. The committee has gained greater confidence that inflation is moving sustainably towards 2% and judges that the risks to achieving its employment and inflation goals are roughly in balance. In other words, they think they're maximizing employment and minimizing inflation, and so they can cut by 0.5 percentage point. Now, at the end of the year, if inflation surprises everyone and rears its head again, you're not going to not only get that 0.5 percentage point cut they're saying might come in December, you might get a rate increase again, and the markets are going to tank right around Christmas time. That's going to be fun. So the bottom line right now is the Federal Reserve is saying it has cut interest rates by 0.5 percentage point and expects that it will also cut interest rates by another 0.5 percentage point by the end of the year, and expects that by the end of 2025, we will have a full another point off interest rates, reducing interest rates by 2 percentage points over the next year and a half. That has encouraged the markets. The markets are rebounding. Right now, as I'm going to commercial break, just so you know, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 166 points. The S&P 500 is up 30 points. The NASDAQ is up 143 points. Now the Dow, as I literally was at 160, now it's up 175 points. The markets are reacting very favorably. They were very surprised. They were expecting a quarter-point rate. Instead, they got a half percentage point cut from the Federal Reserve, which is stimulating the markets today. So your credit card interest rates and mortgage rates and auto loan rates will start to come down, which should provoke more spending in the economy, which is what they hope. Greetings, conversationalists. Welcome. It's Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Remember, please, if you would, text ARMY, A-R-M-Y, to 33777. As we're going around the country, if you text ARMY to 33777, you're going to get a link back in your text message. If you click it, you can put in your first and last name, your zip code and email address. It asks for your phone number, but it's not required. As we're going around the country, for example, the 2 days after the election, we'll be in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We'll be able to let you know. We, in the next year, want to start rolling out our gatherings around the country. Maybe go to Sacramento, go down to Florida, love to be in Virginia, wherever we need to be around the country, and do some live events with the audience as the show has grown. We are coast to coast now and continue to pick up stations. So if you text ARMY to 33777, put in that information. As we come to your area, we'll be able to send you an email and send you the link to the RSVP site. So for those of you in Tulsa, for example, 2 days after the election, November 7th, we're going to do a live event in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It'll be the first election debriefing we do in person with the crowd. We're going to let you know where the venue is. We're working on all those details with KRMG right now. And so if you text ARMY to 33777, put in your info. When we get out there, we'll be able to send you the note, give you the RSVP link, so you'll have advance notice. Now, we got other stuff to talk about. If you're just tuning in, it is breaking news. The Federal Reserve has cut interest rates by 50 basis points. That is 0.5%. Now, how does that help you? Well, as the Fed cuts interest rates to banks, banks lower their mortgage rates and loan rates, and credit cards lower their rates, so your costs begin to come down. Not nearly as low as they were a while back. My car loan rate is, 0.75%. for my car loan. Unbelievable. I'm almost done paying it off. These rates come down and they help you. Speaking of rates, you can get auto loans and mortgages and things like that from Old Glory Bank. Old Glory Bank is my bank. I just recommended a gun store use Old Glory Bank because they're having a hard time with their bank. And Old Glory was founded by conservatives, for conservatives. John Rich, Larry Elder, Ben Carson, people like that. They started the bank. They didn't start it from scratch. They bought a bank in Oklahoma, and they've expanded it nationwide. So they got underlying fundamentals that are solid and great banking, a great app, great debit card, great app on the phone, great website. You can get no-fee checking, no-fee savings. That's what I've got. You can do direct deposit. They've got all sorts of benefits if you're a first responder. What you do is you go to oldglorybank.com, fill out the form, takes less than 8 minutes online, oldglorybank.com. Fill out the form, you get your account going, no-fee checking or no-fee savings. And you go from there with them. You can get loans. You can develop relationships with them. Get car loans. You can get mortgages. Whatever you need, Old Glory Bank wants to take care of you. They really are good. They really are my bank. And you're not going to get canceled. If you're a gun owner, if you're a gun manufacturer, a gun store, you need a bank to do business with, Old Glory Bank. That's why they're there. oldglorybank.com. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply. It's oldglorybank.com. Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States of America. The phone number is 877-973-7425 if you want to be on the program. I want to play you some audio. This is an exchange, and I don't have the video of it. I've just got the exchange. This is Caitlin Collins on CNN with Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas. And Tom Cotton continues to be one of the very best Republicans on television doing combat with reporters. Just listen to this exchange.
Senate Republicans today blocked a bill that would guarantee access to the very thing that a lot of them say they support. It's also the very thing that we have heard from Donald Trump say that he supports. Democrats tried and failed again to pass that measure, which would guarantee access to IVF nationwide. And tonight they are using this vote to hammer Republicans who said no. My source tonight on this is Republican Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas. Senator, great to have you here because you and your fellow Senate Republicans mostly voted against this, arguing that it's a show vote. But Donald Trump, as you know, recently pledged to either have insurance companies or the government pay for fertility treatments. So would you have voted for a bill like this if he was in office?
Well, Caitlin, first off, I have to correct almost everything you said in the lead-in there, almost none of which was accurate about this bill. First off, there's no risk to IVF in this country. All 49 Republican senators, along with President Trump, support IVF. No state restricts or bans IVF. Second, this bill was about a lot more than just IVF. You said that it had to guarantee access. Access is guaranteed in all 50 states right now. You also said that it was about IVF. It's about a lot more than IVF. This bill would mandate coverage for experimental, controversial procedures like cloning or gene editing or providing fertility treatments to men who think they're women, whatever that means. It would also imperil religious liberty. I support IVF, as President Trump does. We also think that we should allow, say, Christian hospitals to operate their affairs as they see fit, according to the dictates of their conscience. Now, it's not surprising that Democrats don't agree with that.
That's Tom Cotton engaging with Caitlin Collins on CNN exactly the way you need to engage, pushing back on their presuppositions. And in fact, this is becoming more and more common. Scott Jennings, who's over at CNN, regularly now having to push back on the presuppositions because the reporters are just embracing the Democratic talking points as fact. And whether it's Tom Cotton or Scott Jennings are saying, wait, slow down, that's not actually true. And of course, the media hates to be called out and told they're pushing misinformation or disinformation when they regularly do it. And I want to talk about the misinformation and disinformation for a minute. If you're a longtime listener to the program, you know what my favorite book is. To Kill a Mockingbird. I love To Kill a Mockingbird. I read it regularly. I go back to it. The movie with Gregory Peck, the black and white movie, is fantastic. But I just have always loved that book. Always loved it. It was one of the first books that I really appreciated. Good American literature. The Iliad, the W.B. Rouse translation is my favorite of the. I love the Iliad. I was never, I realize it's going to be discrediting for some. I was never a massive Lord of the Rings fan like some of my friends. I liked it, but I got a buddy of mine who was telling me he rereads it every summer, all 3 books. I'm like, nah, I read it, and then I moved on. I always loved the Chronicles of Narnia. I like the Harry Potter series, but To Kill a Mockingbird, that's my favorite book. And in To Kill a Mockingbird, there's a character. And his name is Arthur Radley. Arthur Radley lives in a house down the street. It's not a very well kept up house. The yard's not well kept. And Arthur Radley murdered people. In fact, some people think Arthur Radley, he may be living in the house with the bodies of his dead parents. Nobody knows. But Arthur Radley, he is clearly no good, clearly bad, clearly a monster of some kind. And his family, if they're alive, they keep Arthur Radley locked up in that house. If you read the book, you know it's not true. Arthur Radley, Boo Radley, has a mental incapacity and has lived with his parents all of his life. And that's all it is they keep him sheltered from the world because he's different. He's got a mental, physical incapacity. And he turns out to be the hero of the book. I've been thinking a lot about Boo Radley with the stories of the Haitians in Springfield, Ohio. Video circulated last night, and a number of people have emailed me and insisted I need to apologize to my audience because we now have evidence that the Haitians are stealing people's pets and eating them in Springfield, Ohio. The evidence is of a city hall meeting where a member of the council asks the city manager if he's heard anything about this. And the city manager says, yeah, I've heard it. Now, the city manager has told ABC News that it's not true. It's not happening. And now there are Republican activists who are attacking the city manager as a liar because of this video. Now, where I come from, a statement is not evidence. I can tell you something is true and it be a lie. Or I can tell you it's true because I heard other people say it was true and it was a lie, like with Boo Radley. He was not a murderous monster living in this house with possibly dead bodies in the house. Nope, he was a somewhat disfigured, mentally incapacitated man. But he was different. In that difference and his absence, it led the town to rumors. Here, there is no evidence of Haitians stealing people's house pets. And to be clear, that was the original accusation. Now, people have moved the goalpost and said now it's not that they were stolen, it's that they eat cats. Yes, they do. They also perform voodoo ceremonies with chickens. We haven't heard about the missing chickens in Springfield, Ohio, but voodoo is very common in Haiti. Wouldn't be surprised if there are some voodoo ceremonies going on among some of the Haitians. But there's no evidence they've been stealing people's house pets, and that was the original lie. J.D. Vance, when this started, said that there was a woman he talked to who's a constituent of his in Ohio who said the Haitians stole her cat, probably ate it. A Wall Street Journal reporter went to the woman's home, and she said actually the cat had run away. She assumed it was the Haitians that had gotten it, but the cat came back. The cat was there with her. So the cat that started all of this with J.D. Vance turns out to be alive and back in its owner's home. The video that was uncovered by Christopher Rufo of someone barbecuing a cat, and it looks like he's barbecuing a cat to me, is from Dayton, Ohio, a year ago from men from Congo, which is not in Haiti, but in Africa. The video of the woman who ate the cat, who was crazy, was an American woman in Canton, Ohio. There's no evidence of cats and dogs being stolen and eaten by Haitians in Springfield, Ohio. Given the habits of Haitians, I wouldn't be surprised if some of them have eaten a cat, but they haven't been stealing other people's cats and dogs. Here's my problem with this. Here's my problem. Do you know what's a true story? A true story is that a violent Venezuelan gang has taken over an apartment complex in Aurora, Colorado, and when the locals started complaining, the Democrats said that's not true, and it turns out it was. The Venezuelan gang has also set up shop in El Paso, Texas, and they're even threatening local law enforcement. In Georgia the other day, 2 women were killed by a drunk illegal alien driving in a souped-up Dodge Charger. Now, I want you to think about that one for a moment. This is not your ordinary off-the-lot Dodge Charger. This is one with a bigger engine, higher horsepower, a racing machine, and it is very expensive. Where did the illegal alien who ICE was looking for, there was a hold on him from ICE, where did the illegal alien get the money to acquire the souped-up Dodge Charger? I would like to know the answer to that question. I don't know. I'm not suggesting a conspiracy. I'm just curious. How does an illegal alien in the United States of America afford a souped-up Dodge Charger that can go extremely fast, that collides into a Honda Accord and kills 2 American citizens and injures a child? There's a story there. All I'm asking Republicans is there are 47 days and 10 hours until polls open on Election Day in this country. Can we stop convincing ourselves that by telling exaggerated lies, we're doing ourselves a favor by forcing the media to look at a story? Can we stop that? Can we instead acknowledge that there are so many true stories, so many real stories, so many horrific stories out there that maybe we should focus on the true stories and not the lies? Because what the media is doing, I know you've convinced yourselves that now they're reporting on Springfield, Ohio, but they're not actually reporting on Springfield, Ohio. They're reporting that you're telling a bunch of racist lies about Haitians stealing other people's dogs and cats. And some of you believe it's true. And the problem is that these stories are taking on a life of their own and they become discrediting. For example, a story I didn't talk about several weeks ago, for which I got hate mail for not talking about it, that I was protecting Kamala Harris. The story was that Kamala Harris had hit and been a drive-by in 2011 hit-and-run incident that left a 13-year-old girl paralyzed. Now, I want you to think about that story. I didn't talk about that story. That story spread all over social media. I didn't talk about the story. And I got hate from people claiming I was clearly biased for Kamala Harris because I wasn't talking about this story. It surfaced on a news site for KBSF TV in San Francisco, and I looked at that news site. And, you know, I'm in TV and radio, and KBSF TV doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. And I was a little bit curious, and I couldn't find anything about it. And people were upset. It turns out it was a Russian troll farm that set up this website and hired an actress who has now admitted she's the actress in the video, talking about Kamala Harris being involved in the hit and run. And all I could think was, this is 2011. The media in California would have done something with this. Her Democratic opponents would have done something with this when she was running for office, and no Democrat ever attacked Kamala Harris, even when she was running in contested primaries. And it made it all over social media. It was a Russian troll farm. It turns out it appears it's a Russian troll farm that has orchestrated all the calls to all the schools in Springfield, Ohio, which again does raise the question of what the Biden administration is doing to deal with the Russian troll farms and things like that. There is a story today that I haven't talked about, and I have emails from people wondering why I'm not going to talk about it. That a car full of explosives was found at near a Trump rally in Long Island, New York. Donald Trump is doing a rally in Long Island, New York, and a car full of explosives has been found. The police say what happened is a man who was self-training, a crazy man, who is self-training a bomb-sniffing dog, at least that's what he says, reported that his dog detected explosives in this car. The dog is not really being trained to sniff explosives. It's a crazy man who's convinced he's training his dog to sniff explosives. The dog supposedly sniffed explosives in this car. The police said there were no explosives. It's not just the New York police saying there are no explosives. Turns out it's the Donald J. Trump campaign for president of the United States that also says the story isn't true. And yet, it's already taken over social media, and people want to know why yours truly is not talking about this story. I'm not talking about the story because the police say it's not true. The reporters in the area say it's not true. The local government says it's not true. And the Trump campaign says it's not true, even though people read it on the internet, so it must be true. We have 47 days and 10 hours left in this campaign, and I don't understand why we on our side have decided to tell lies instead of telling the truth, because the truth is far more damning and discrediting than the lies. And when we tell the lies about the dogs and cats of Springfield, Ohio being stolen and eaten, what's happening is the media gets to discredit us, and we don't get to challenge the presuppositions of the media. Tom Cotton is scoring points on CNN on Caitlin Collins by disrupting her presuppositions and the stories she tells. You tell the stories of all the Americans being killed and injured by illegal aliens, they can't debunk that story. It's true. You tell the stories of the gangs, they can't debunk those stories, they're true. You tell the stories of the increased cost in groceries and gas compared to when Trump was president, they can't debunk the story because it's true. And for some unknown reason, too many people on our side have decided they'd rather scratch and tickle their own ears with silly stories that are not true. And the media gets to focus on those instead of the true stories that actually could be used against Kamala Harris. In the meantime, turns out Boo Radley's not crazy and not a murderer, not a monster. He's just got mental issues and lives with his parents. Maybe many of the Haitians in Springfield, Ohio, are like Boo Radley. The rumor in the neighborhood, because they're different, took on a life of its own, and people are convinced themselves of the truth, even though the truth is different. You can learn a lot from reading books. You can learn a lot from Hillsdale College as well, and you can go to ericforhillsdale.com today and learn so much for free from Hillsdale College. You can subscribe to their podcast network on your favorite podcast app and hear great conversations from Larry Arnn and scholars and others at Hillsdale College. You can subscribe to Imprimis and get it completely for free in your mailbox. You can subscribe and get Hillsdale College's great lecture series on the Constitution and citizenship from just fantastic scholars like Victor Davis Hanson, and it's all free. All you have to do is go to Eric, E-R-I-C-K, ericforhillsdale.com today. Go to ericforhillsdale.com. Sign up with Hillsdale College. You get the podcast for free. Get in your podcast app. Look for Hillsdale College's podcast network. Get Imprimis. It's show prep for your mind. I've learned so much from Hillsdale College. I've been getting Imprimis since I was in law school. Years and years ago now. Still paid off my law school loans and hadn't practiced law in a while. But I've been getting Imprimis. It's show prep for my mind. It's a great way to get involved with the conservative movement and to learn, not to be indoctrinated, but to get educated about this country and its founding. You get it all from Hillsdale College at ericforhillsdale.com. Howdy, welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. Glad to have you with me as I continue to alienate everyone, according to my email. Oh my gosh, people get super sensitive before the election. And I got to tell you, in my experience, all the people who email and say that they're never listening again, they wind up being the most passionate listeners. It's like Brokeback Trent from Tulsa. He listens every day so he can email me and tell me that, he's not listening anymore. I got to play you this audio. This is too funny. This is from Dana Bash on CNN.
When you listen to Kamala Harris on what she will do, you can almost start a drinking game every time she says small businesses. Mm-hmm. Let me give you an example.
Part of my plan under my economic opportunity plan going forward is that right now, startup entrepreneurs, small businesses only get a tax deduction of $5,000. Nobody can start a small business with $5,000. So I'm expanding that to $50,000. Understanding, again, that when people have the opportunity to have the resources to get started, they're going to put the good ideas, they're going to put the hard work into it.
Describe the politics of that.
When she says that, she also talks about being a middle-class kid. That's also at the front of her answers. If you look at the interviews they've been doing with local media, and they've opened up a bit more since the debate, the first question is often, what are you going to do to lower prices? Which is a very hard question for an incumbent party to answer. And it has implications that are very Trumpian. It is, Trump says he's going to do mass deportation. That'll decrease demand. Trump says he'll explore more energy. That'll decrease energy costs. Democrats can point to the fact that inflation is actually, it was bad 2 years ago. It's not now. What people want to hear is, how do you make the prices go down? So everything she says is something realistic that could survive a fact check that answers a very hard question.
She can't do it. She has no policy. Her policy is, I was the middle class. And the implied policy is, and you're never getting out of it. The opportunity for growth in this country is over with Kamala Harris as president, because she'll smother the economy until somebody else can come along and fix it. That's their policy.